Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond. I'm a literacy specialist, and in this video, I'm going to talk about how you can support students with dyslexia. No matter if you're a classroom teacher or reading specialist or some other kind of educator or even a parent, this will be helpful information to you. Before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, I would love for you to do that now, and then also hit the little bell so that you don't miss out on any of the brand new videos I post about teaching literacy. First of all, if you're an educator of any kind at any level, it's so important that you are aware of the signs of dyslexia to know what to look for, because we need to make sure that kids with dyslexia get what they need to be successful. And so identification of reading issues as early as possible is really important so that they can get support, so that they don't continue to struggle and their self-esteem suffers. Kids with dyslexia, people with dyslexia, can absolutely learn to read, but many of them do need special and extra support. And so we want to be really aware of that and ready to advocate for them and give them what they need. Dyslexia is also a very common reading disability, and it is considered to be the most common disability that we know of now. So people think that up to maybe 20% of kids, sometimes more depending on who's in your classroom, may have dyslexia. And so for that reason, it is very likely that you have worked with a student with dyslexia or that you will work with many students with dyslexia throughout your career. Right now though, I'm curious, are you working with any kids who have a dyslexia diagnosis? Let me know in the comments. Before we get to talking about what to do and how to help kids with dyslexia, which could be an entire training in itself, an entire program, which I have done in the past, we need to talk about what dyslexia is, right? So dyslexia is sometimes called an unexpected difficulty in learning to read. It's a specific learning disability. You may see it, depending upon where in the world you are, you may see it just listed as a specific reading disability on like an IEP or some kind of documentation. Dyslexia is neurobiological in origin. So it's coming from, things that are present in the brain. There are brain scans that actually reveal differences between the brains of people who don't have dyslexia and people who do have dyslexia. And it often results from difficulties with phonological processing. And phonological awareness is part of phonological processing, so you've probably heard of that. And dyslexia is characterized by difficulties in accurate and often fluent word recognition, as well as difficulties with spelling. So not so much comprehension. You could have a specific word reading disability, dyslexia, and you could have a comprehension issue potentially, but just because a child is struggling with comprehension doesn't mean that they have a comprehension issue, because it could just be a hidden decoding, a hidden word reading difficulty. So we have to be really careful to be aware of like, okay, well, maybe they're struggling with comprehension, but is it because they're struggling to read the words accurately, or they're reading so slowly that their brains are just, taken up by trying to figure out the words, and so therefore they don't have a lot of working memory space available to focus on comprehension. So we have to be really clear on what's going on, because dyslexia can result in comprehension issues, but at the core, this is about word recognition and fluent word recognition. Now let's also talk about what dyslexia isn't. And by the way, I have this information in a freebie for you. It's included in the caption for this video, so make sure to grab that. But dyslexia is not related to intelligence. There are wildly smart people that also have dyslexia, wildly talented people that also have dyslexia. These two things, intelligence and dyslexia, are just not related. Dyslexia cannot be created by poor instruction. You might have a child that's struggling with reading because they haven't gotten the instruction they need. That's very possible, but that doesn't mean that they have dyslexia. It doesn't mean that it caused dyslexia. Dyslexia is it's not related to poor motivation. So it's not that the child isn't trying hard enough or that they're being sloppy. There are literal brain differences that just make it harder for them to learn to read and to become fluent. Dyslexia at its core is also not a visual problem. So there's a myth that if kids read letters backward, then that is dyslexia. That's not dyslexia. Dyslexia is related to language and phonological processing, right? And so it's not a visual problem. It's not seeing things backwards. Now, sometimes kids with dyslexia do struggle with letter reversals longer than their peers. However, dyslexia at the core is not a visual problem. Dyslexia is not something that goes away. It's not like it gets cured. You have treatment for dyslexia, yes, but it's not something that goes away. It doesn't mean that people with dyslexia can't learn to read, because they can and do. They just need the right instruction. And dyslexia is also not the same in all individuals. So you could have a person with dyslexia who really struggles to read, okay? Like really struggles, even into adulthood. You could also have a person with dyslexia that gets early intervention and reads very successfully, and it really doesn't interfere dramatically in their adult life, okay? So early intervention is definitely key, but just know that there's also like kind of a spectrum of severity when it comes to dyslexia. So you've been hearing me say that early intervention and appropriate instruction is key, which is so true. But what does that actually look like? Well, what you're going to hear me describe is actually outstanding instruction for all learners. So this stuff that I'm going to describe that people with dyslexia need, children with dyslexia need, actually all of our students benefit from it. So it's not that the kids that have a dyslexia diagnosis are the only ones who should be receiving it. Now, that said, often kids with dyslexia are going to need more intensity and more frequency of instruction. They're going to need more practice. They're going to need more exposures to the same word before they really learn that word, and it's a sight word and it's in long-term memory. More opportunities to practice fluency, more repetition and review, just because of the way their brain works. Again, this is not related to intelligence. Okay, so there are also sometimes, of course, kids struggle with different things. And this is true of any child. Maybe they're leaving the endings off of words, or maybe they're confusing vowel sounds. So really, no matter what, a child might have specific strategies that are going to work very well for them. But generally speaking, everything I'm going to talk about, this is helpful for all kids. So number one, we want to have, starting early, we want to have phonemic awareness instruction, direct instruction, practice for the kids. We want to have a phonics scope and sequence that is being followed with explicit instruction, clear and direct explanations with modeling, gradual release. This might sound familiar if you've been an educator for any amount of time, because this is all stuff that is good for all kids. And if you're interested, by the way, in learning more about phonics instruction and what that should look like, I do have lots of other videos on it on my YouTube channel. We're just not going to go like super in depth on it, but there are plenty of phonics videos on the Learning at the Primary Pond channel. So we're doing that explicit instruction. We're breaking down skills. We're not like tackling all multisyllabic words at once. We are breaking that down into, like 2-syllable words with closed syllables, and 2-syllable words with closed and open syllables. And we're gradually, building up to where kids can master things. We need data-driven instruction. So we need to know, are kids getting these skills? If they're not, we need to not just keep plodding along in the scope and sequence. We need to go back. We need to be responsive to student needs, right? Again, this is true of all kids. And structured literacy, I've been talking about phonemic awareness and phonics, but structured literacy is this term that was created by the International Dyslexia Association, and it encompasses many things: phonology, sound symbol association, phonics, syllable instruction, morphology, syntax, semantics, meaning. And so there's a lot involved, right? And these principles of explicit instruction apply to all of these areas. And again, dyslexic learners may need more repetition, more exposures, right? Maybe more small group or one-on-one practice, but also they're not universal. Like, some kids are gonna need more help than others, right? And some strategies are gonna work better with certain kids than with others. But broadly, we want to use structured literacy with all of our kids, and more of it for our kids with dyslexia. Another thing we need to consider too is the emotional needs, and even like the brain needs of kids with dyslexia. So, if we intervene early and a child, maybe they struggle a little bit in like kindergarten or first, but they get the support that they need, their self-esteem might not suffer, hopefully. But unfortunately, what often happens is that schools will wait to intervene, and in that time, the child is struggling. They're feeling unsuccessful. Because think about it. Kids have to go to school, at least in the US, and every day they're being asked to do things, reading, that they don't feel good at because they're not good at it yet, but they see their peers getting better and better. And they're wondering, what's wrong with me? Am I dumb? Am I not smart, right? Which is not true at all. But just think about how that must feel. And especially as kids move up in the grades, reading is involved in everything. Math, word problems, science, social studies. And this is something that's very hard for kids with dyslexia. And so it's taxing on them emotionally. So we need to think about how we can meet them where we're at and acknowledge what they're going through and give them a little extra attention and love as far as just encouraging them and creating opportunities for them to see their own progress. Are they graphing fluency? Are they, number of words they could decode correctly? Help them see their own progress so that they know that they are moving forward. And also, if they have a diagnosis, obviously sometimes it's hard to know how much to say as an educator, right? But as much as you can, make sure that they know that they are smart, and this diagnosis, this difference that they have just means that they need a little extra. They need, a little bit more help in this area, but it does not mean that they're not smart. The other thing too that I wanted to mention is their brain needs. So working memory is, kind of think of it like the sticky note that you have in your brain, metaphorically, of like what the brain is working on right now. So if a kid is sounding out the word stop, the st, ah, and p sounds are in their brain as they're working on, blending them together, saying the sounds. So it's what they're working on right now. And because, kids with dyslexia often struggle with working memory, but reading just requires so much more effort for them, their working memory is very taxed. And so they may need more frequent breaks. They may need to read smaller chunks of text before talking about it or before taking a break. It's harder for them, and so it's going to tax their brain, so they may need some more breaks. Just some things to think about. All right, well, there's so much more we could dive into, but I want to leave you here with a freebie. Check the caption for that freebie that's all about dyslexia. Of course, let me know if you have any questions. Thank you so much for watching. I do hope that this was helpful. Before you leave, it would mean so much to me if you would hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in my next video.